Welcome to a PK-12 engagement workshop. There's some thanks in order here. Thanks to Dr. Marco Fernandez for helping to support the workshop series that we've done this year. Thanks to my colleague Amy Jones to help join this with the Plant Science Initiative represented, along with the PK-12 for the college. Kaylee Shear is also assisting with the PK-12 Engagement Initiative, and so she's done a lot of work organizing this, helping with some of the logistics, and hopefully you're enjoying your lunch. Please do. I'm Neil Knobloch. In case you don't know me, I have been in the role of helping to chair and facilitate PK-12 Engagement Council in our college for 4 years now. And so several of you have attended those meetings or are on the council. For those who are not, if you have any good ideas or interests, just let us know and we'll plug you in as the best we can. Excellent. Thank you for introducing yourself. Part of this is to try to build a sense of community of people with common interests in the college around this initiative, and so hopefully that will help reinforce who's doing what. The other thing is that we conducted a needs assessment a couple years ago, and if you could guess, of all the topics that people were most interested in the college with PK-12 engagement, what do you think emerged as kind of the number one or the top of the list? You're smiling, and so I think you have a pretty good idea of what it is, right? Any thoughts? Today's topic, assessment. And so in the fall, how many were able to attend the one on standards, learning standards? Okay. And so today's topic links to that, because learning standards do what? They help us identify our outcomes. And so today we'll be talking about outcomes. The next one we did in the fall, how many of you were able to attend that? It was aligning your lesson. I'm sorry, not aligning the lesson, but refining your lesson. We aligned the lesson first with standards. The second one, we refined the lesson, which we really looked at different ways to organize content and process to engage learners. And so that was also connected to today's topic, because what will appear in a lesson plan that we need to use for our assessment, it's what we call the learning objective. And if you recall, this is a form of review for those who were there or those who weren't there, but what's the difference between a learning objective and a learning outcome? I tried to simplify it. In education, we could say, well, one is, what we want the students to learn, and the outcome is then what they are able to demonstrate that they learned. But if you think about what students should learn or be able to do and what students were able to do, isn't that the same thing? A learning objective and a learning outcome, really, you should start thinking about it as it's really the same thing, as a planner and now as someone who might look at assessment. So when we say learning outcomes, don't be thrown by that, because you already know what a learning objective is. And so we just try to tie those together very closely. You'll see that learning outcomes can be categorized. So you're going to start to see some of those differences versus a learning objective. But conceptually, think of them as the same thing. So today we're going to focus on assessment, the most difficult topic that you can ask someone like me to teach. So you have them in your field. In animal science, the most difficult topic is, and you would be able to provide one. In plant science, the most difficult topic, and in entomology, you have difficult topics, right? Concepts. Today, we're talking about the one that's pretty tough in education. And so if you leave here today saying, I'm still not 100% clear, it's just because it's the nature of the topic. Well, hopefully it won't be because of me. And Amy tried to make it more confusing. So I sat in a workshop like this in Salem, Oregon at the School Garden Summit, at a School Garden Summit. There were 300 people there. The room was packed. I had to stand because all the chairs were filled, and it was a room at least this size. And people were very interested in assessment. And that was good for me to see, because they really stayed at a higher level than what I felt like you probably wanted today. So we're going to get really specific, and we're going to talk about a few detailed strategies or maybe detailed ideas so that you can wrestle with those a little bit and then think about how does that relate to your work. So let's get started. One of the things that I'd like to do is to have you look at the handout that we prepared. Now this pyramid, it was my attempt of trying to show, when you think about impact in a number of ways, okay? So, if I ask the question, what is impact? How would you answer the question? What is impact?
Who is the audience that we're impacting?
Okay, so it would be a K-12 audience. It could be the teachers, it could be the teachers, it could be the students, or it could even be who shows up with the students, parents sometimes, depending on your program. So, but it's K-12 in that arena. Informal, non-formal, or classroom-based.
How would things just a change in behavior or action resulting from whatever happened there?
Change in behavior, change in something. Yeah, excellent. What else comes to mind when you hear the word impact?
The influence that you had on that group, and did they learn something that they're going to be able to pick away from whatever the activity is?
So I heard the word influence and I heard the word learn, which the way I was taught, the definition of learning is what you shared, Dr. Fernandez. Change in behavior, knowledge, skill. You're able to do something after you were taught. So it sounds like learning and impact are starting to come together here. Any other ideas of what impact might be?
I think you start with thinking, and it has a continuum to aha moment, so it can be a very simple thinking to learn something or reach that aha moment.
So it's when maybe the learner themselves are expressing something different. So they may, not sure, and then once they express, I get it, I got it. So that's impact. Excellent. Good.
Impact means exchange of knowledge. So it doesn't necessarily mean they got everything, but there was an exchange. So I presented, or you presented something, and they took something back. It may not necessarily be exactly what I wanted or whatever, but it's something that they'll go and take on. So to me, it's an exchange. And impact is I provided something, and then they take it. So an exchange of knowledge or information is where I see impact as well, too, in the K-12.
Yeah, so in a way, if I'm hearing correctly, the audience somehow gave something back. And in order for that to happen, you wouldn't have known, right? So that happened. Now you can start to see, did I have an impact? So that idea of feedback or producing something is what informs impact. I like that. That's good. Other thoughts about what is impact? So impact is a lot of these ideas. I'm not going to give you a definition, but the way I think about it is what was the result of learning. And now you can say, well, that could exist in a number of different ways. So this is where I want you to stretch yourself a little bit. Think about impact. Somebody could say, well, they walked out of this workshop and they said, I learned something new. Was that impact?
At the basic level, yes.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I'm looking for more, but at the basic level. If I'm thinking K-12 and I'm thinking maybe a 4th grader, 5th grader.
Now it could be a year from now, and you think back to, okay, I'm sitting in front of my desk on the computer, and I'm now working on an evaluation plan for a NEFA grant project, higher education, or maybe a SPECA grant. And so you are thinking back to, oh yeah, I got it in that one workshop. And you go to the resources and you follow the logic model or you follow the process. Is that impact?
I think it can be long-term, it can be short-term.
Okay.
I mean, the depth is totally different.
Okay, excellent. You're picking up on the key concepts here. So let's turn it another way. Someone walks away from, what's your new program? Or your new name?
New name.
PASA.
Yeah.
Walks away from the PASA saying, that was fun. Or Myron, in his well-designed research initiative, has actually set up a comparison group to a previous year. And he's done something different, and he knows now that students are more excited about agricultural careers after making a change in the program than they were in the previous version of this. Which one's impact? The student who says that was really cool, or he has a more experimental he has an experimental design that now shows that this group got it better than this group.
Even the framework, if it's in the framework of trying to get that grant, you definitely want to be.
So the question I have here for you is, if it's descriptive, it's self-reported, is that impact?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
If it is causal, cause-effect, is that impact? Okay, and you're saying yes to both. So let's now put this into a framework. And I'm not saying that this was my attempt of trying to simplify what I was hearing in a previous workshop. So look at this as three continuums rather than trying to fill in the boxes. They're not boxes, the objects, the open objects. Look at this as three continuums, if you will. So if we thought about this, Myron, if someone walks out of your workshop and they just exclaim, that was really fun, or your camp, that's really fun, qualitative or quantitative? Probably qualitative in nature, right? You did an assessment, you had a comparison group, you probably were doing what? Quantitative. So we have one continuum. The data, the evidence could be qualitative or quantitative. And we probably could even stop somewhere in the middle and have both called mixed. Okay? Another one is that we could have this is the first one you picked up on, the idea of short-term versus long-term impact. Many of these grants that you are thinking about want to see what? Long-term impact. Within what? A 3-year period. So the nature of that is very difficult. So what we do is we have to argue that whatever our short-term impact is, our stepping stones for basically the next grant or what could happen even after the grant, which is then that idea of long-term impact. But if you can do follow-up, I'm picturing one of my graduate students. He did a follow-up about 9 months after the pre-college experience. That's longer term, right? So that follow-up is really important in that case. It's more expensive, it's time-consuming, but follow-up is a way to move you up on that continuum, if you will. Okay. The other one is, you picked up on, is this idea that the nature of the impact could be descriptive or it could be causal. And so which is better? Well, which one's easier? Usually descriptive. And which one is better? Well, you could argue that maybe something that's really rich and descriptive, that could be quite strong. Some anecdotal stories could be quite powerful. So it depends on who your audience is. Many times, though, when we write these grant projects, they want to see something that moves us up that continuum into being more causal. And I think you understand the nature of that, because it's how scientists think about what was the change. How do you know the change was because of this program and not maybe other variables? That idea of relationship, I want you to think about correlations. So if you have some quantitative data, if you start to show relationships, a relationship does not mean that it is cause-effect. It just means that two variables or more are varying together. But that starts to move us in the direction of thinking about what might the cause-effect relationship be. Okay? And you can do that qualitatively too. With qualitative data, if you extend your stay long enough, it's not just a one-time answer or a one-time interview, but if you stay there long enough and stay in the field long enough, you can start to see, I'm seeing patterns here. So the idea of patterns, if you want to update your little handout and think qualitatively, you would start to use the word patterns. If you start to see those patterns starting to show up, then that would be moving us from descriptive into this idea that we're starting to maybe explain something. And so we use the word explanatory in qualitative data rather than causal. Usually you don't see someone in a qualitative research article talk about cause-effect. They'll talk about it as explanatory. Okay? Descriptive versus explanatory. So, useful? A way to help us conceptualize this? I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, to apply this. Number 1, select a program specifically that you work with or that you're thinking about working with. Okay? I want you to try to be specific. Don't think big. Think really specific. What would be impact? If you could say an impact statement, what would the impact statement be because of your program, Jeff? Or because of your program, Andrea? What would, if you could say it, what would it look like? Write the sentence out. And then my third question is this. what evidence would you need to support that? And maybe these three continuum in the shape of a triangle might help you to think it through. Take a couple minutes, see what you come up with. Identify a program or an event or lesson that you do with K-12 audiences, could be teachers or students. Number 2, what's the impact statement you'd like to make? Number 3, what evidence would you need to support that? Yeah. And I had an aha moment. The reason why I really enjoy doing these workshops is because it forces me to rethink some of the assumptions I've had, or the ways I've been thinking about this. And the way that Jeff described this, he started up here at the top is, okay, what's the impact statement? It did exactly what I asked you to do. What's that big idea that you really want to attain, which is the notion of behavior? He wants people to live every day thinking about, I'm going to save, I'm going to invest. Well, we have to break that down a little bit, and then we thought about this idea of, let's go all the way back. The line of knowledge is if he gave them knowledge of the stock market and strategies to do, perhaps then they would apply that knowledge into a skill which may become so redundant in their life that it becomes a habit to lead to this idea of a behavior. We also think about this notion of attitudes, and I kind of wrestle a little bit with attitudes myself as a researcher, because usually an attitude is more global. It's more general. And I have a difficult time thinking that in my little program I'm going to be able to change an attitude. But in my little program I could be really specific and ask about, do you want to do this? Are you interested in this? Is your intention to apply to Purdue or pursue an ag major? That's motivation. So perhaps it's just getting a little bit more specific when you're doing your programming and see how it could eventually connect to an attitude, which would eventually connect you to your behavior. And that was the way of me starting to organize, oh, this makes sense. You may not be able to do these things in your grant proposal or whatever assessment you're trying to do, but you could argue the reason why you're choosing these is because you will hope that they lead to something. So, because you're just so short term typically in a 3-year, 4-year window to maybe able to get that accomplished. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. Thanks for participating with that. A shift to a new activity. Amy is going to share what she has come up with, and then we're going to try to link this to outcomes and then wrap this workshop up.
So when we start talking about impact, we just thought we would come up with a little bit of an activity, sort of a game, to help you to think about maybe what sort of items you can include on your. Got it? What sort of items you can include in your assessment tools or ask your students or audiences when you're doing your programs. So it's warming up a little bit. So I want it to be a fun game, so it's a little bit of an activity. I suppose maybe I should put my game show voice on. It's an assessment tool to measure your knowledge on assessment tools. So get excited. So we're just going to go through on the ruler the different numbers, and I want you to help me identify whether that item is measuring knowledge, attitude, motivation, or behavior. So for the first one, after attending this program, I have a better idea of what agriculture is. Knowledge, they say. That's correct. You guys are good. So number 2, I don't think agriculture is just farmers and hillbillies. We don't. Oh, so this is the next one. So what you think is the second one?
Knowledge, attitude.
Thinking it's attitudes. Correct. So number 3, after attending this program, I am going to take my dog on more walks. I got a little crazy with the ideas, okay? You know, maybe that's something you want to do.
That is, I would call that behavior that's doing something. Now, if you had to go, I could answer that.
Uh-oh.
No.
Motivation? So let's see.
Motivated to take your dog because I have no idea what the
So where do you So how do you identify the difference between motivation and behavior here? I'm going to take my dog on more walks. I'm going to. So how would you measure, how would you turn this statement into a behavior statement?
After attending this program, I have taken my dog on more walks.
Get 5 points. I don't know. The points mean nothing. It's like, whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter. After attending this program, I can explain the process of photosynthesis. Knowledge. Very good. Since attending the program, I have implemented a successful recycling program at my school. Exactly, you guys got it that time. So behavior is more on the, I was explaining it with the Price is Right Mountaineer guy. Has anybody seen the Price is Right, where he's like moving up the mountain? So it's like based on, you like that, Gwen? They didn't know what I was talking about. So it's like yodeling up the mountain. And so you're building towards that behavior, so it takes more time on the spectrum to be able to measure behavior.
You need to model the yodeling for us.
Oh yeah, the yodeling? Yeah. That would make it more entertaining. After attending this program, I think I could build a machine. Correct. So we also had discussion that it might also flirt a little bit with attitude. So you're changing their attitude. There's a lot of programs where you're hoping to build student self-efficacy in programs and help change their attitude towards themselves, which sort of is in between the spectrum of attitude and motivation. So. Very good. Before I attended this workshop, I thought plants were boring. Very good. I can name 5 different ways I need agriculture after this program. Yes. You guys are experts now. My family and I eat more fruits and vegetables now after attending the session. So if we were wanting to make it motivation, oops. Oh, is that Mr. McClure?
We plan to eat more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. Very good. So after attending this workshop, I think PK-12 engagement is more important. Correct. 5,000 points for everyone. So that's just an example. If you are interested in how to build an activity like that, it's really essentially hyperlinking all within a PowerPoint. It's really easy to make, but if you have questions on how to do that, it's an activity I like to do that gets people more engaged. So, go ahead.
Excellent. So, second activity. Third is to now try to link your ideas to resources. So, how do we do that? How many of you are familiar with the logic model? You've heard of the logic model.
And you're saying, what is a logic model? Well, I think if you flip over the first sheet, the first page of your packet, you will see an example of a logic. Well, maybe not the first, it's the second page. Yep, there you go. The logic model is an example of what? Why do you think they call this a logic model? What is it doing for you? Exactly. It's organizing and laying things out so that there is alignment, okay? And it starts to help you identify, this is what I need to focus on. Does this help you write your evaluation plan? If you are, and I keep linking this to the idea that you need an evaluation plan. Some of you are in extension, or some of you are asked to provide what are the outcomes of your work. And if that's not enough to motivate you, you'll be asked to do it if you ever write a grant, which is why probably a lot of us are here. So will this help you write your evaluation plan? Now, they tend to ask for it. NEFA requires it now, so they ask for it. But does it, or does it fall short? I'm asking the question kind of in a way to press you a little bit. It does in what way? So it's more global, it's bigger picture, it identifies what your outcomes are. Remember backward design? It's a great tool to help you check to see if your outcomes are there, if you're thinking about your audience and the evidence that they need to provide you, and is that aligned with the activities? So it does an excellent job with that. Where it doesn't do a very good job And this is linking you to activity number 2. So activity number 1, do you see it? Think about impact. Think about this in a little bigger picture way. That's a logic model process, which I figured a lot of you were familiar with. The second piece here, when Amy shared with us specific statements that could be used to try to measure outcomes, a logic model does not go to that level of specificity. So then what do we need to do next? If we're going to really write an excellent evaluation plan, we're going to have to get more specific. And so what do we need to do to get there? I believe if you turn the page, you'll see examples of how to get to a more specific level. So once you have your logic model, now you start to write your assessment plan. And that comes from the Framework for Evaluating the Impacts of Informal Science Education Projects. This is a resource that NSF published a few years ago, and that's also on your list of resources that you might want to star. This is where we actually just copy-pasted from this resource manual so you could start to see. What do you notice as you start to look at these examples? Excellent. It now says time. Yeah. Yeah, and the logic model usually doesn't always specify when will this happen. Okay, when will this occur? Excellent. What else do you see? You may need to compare one to another to see this piece. It was what Amy just did with her little game. The categories, exactly. There are different types, different categories of outcomes. And so that you can start to see, oh, if I'm actually going after behavior, that will look a little differently than if I'm going to try to assess knowledge. And so you can now start, well, that's why we provided you with so many of these little examples, so that you can start to see those differences. And it also does what? So not just categories, not just timeline, but it does one more thing. Excellent. Your logic model typically does not speak specific enough about what evidence do you need. And so now you have to think about what the evidence is, and then usually linked with that, the evidence needs to be retrieved in some way, meaning your data collection or the tool you're going to use. Some of you may have a survey, a questionnaire that you use, or a knowledge test, or an interview, or an open-ended question on paper that they'll respond to. So that's what we mean by data collection tools. And this plan would usually have that as well. So hopefully this is useful for you to start to see that you need a big picture for the evaluation. That is called the logic model. You then need to have more specific strategies identified to now take the logic model and put it into operation, to put it into action steps. And that's what these little tables are doing for you. When I write an evaluation plan, I will have both. And if they have room in the appendix, I will make a one-page summary of these tables that you see in front of you. I may have one that specifies, well, usually I align them with the objectives of the grant. So objective number 1, and it may have something to do with knowledge, and so then that's my knowledge row. The second one, it might be an objective about motivation, and so then I can specify that as well. So it all depends on how you organize whatever the project is that you want to then organize this table. It's what I call the table. It's the table of assessment metrics, or whatever name you want to give it. But you can see it's much more specific and detailed. When you do this, then the evaluation plan is pretty simple to write. You explain your table. You can summarize it. If they have room for something in the appendix, some grant, they do not allow for that. But if they give you like 1 or 2 pages, this is the one I definitely put in there. If they don't, then what I do is I somehow try to make it a condensed version and show them as a table in the text. Because it can say a whole lot more than what the text can say. And you just have to summarize it with a little less narrative then. Okay? All right. So what I'd like to do at this point is to check with you on your impact statement that you had identified earlier. Can you now drill down a little bit more specifically and identify what type of outcome would that be? If you go to the next handout, you'll see yes at the top. It's the Youth Experience Survey 2.0. colleagues at the University of Illinois that I worked with developed this instrument, and they developed this instrument because they wanted to know what was the difference between a youth experience in sports versus 4-H versus FFA versus drama and a fine arts program. And so they developed this instrument to try to see if youth were having different experiences. So you'll see that there's a number of variables on this one, and the reason why I chose this one, not only is that it's very well developed, it's excellent, it's sound statistically, it factor analyzes with these different variables, but it also will show you different types of variables. So some of these would probably reflect things you are interested in, like engagement, or perceptions, or an attitude. We haven't used the word perception before, so I'm sorry to introduce that one to you at such a late part of this workshop. But the idea of an attitude, or someone even said this idea about knowing more about myself, self-awareness, okay? And we didn't even talk about some of those today. So I wanted to expand you into a little bit, maybe of a wider window, that there are some of these other variables that exist out there too, that look at these youth dimensions. There are a lot of different instruments out there that you can use. If you need more help finding resources where they are, we included those links, a few of those links, on the resources page that I think sci-far.netsearch.org. That's an extension related website that has also listed a lot of these assessment tools that have been used in extension as well. And then the list could go on and on and on with other journals that I would tend to look at, that you may not be familiar with, and so you start to do searches and you might be able to find additional ones now that we've given you some words to start to use. Youth motivation, youth knowledge, or student motivation, student knowledge, things of those keywords will also link you up with those. All right. We are closing in on towards the end of this workshop. Do you have questions or comments that you would like to, observations you'd like to share about assessment?
So we are also talking, we have a small committee within the PK-12 Engagement Council, including some metrics and some items on our assessments that are all the same across the board. So anyone doing any type of programs are going to have similar, not in all aspects, so you can personalize your assessment, but that it might include some items that are the same. But yes, I'd like to do that.
So what Amy's planted the idea that Myron, I don't know, Sherry, if you were there, several of us gathered together out of the subcommittee from the council, and we said if we had a dashboard for PK-12 engagement in the college, what would we want to know regarding reach? So the number of participants, who would they be? What demographics would we want to report? So that's one half of the dashboard, if you will. The other half would be then impact. And impact to me would be something that would probably rotate, and it would be specific programs like Massey or PASA or the Economic Council, maybe the stock market game. And so if they were using common assessments, then people would recognize, oh, I know that variable. I see youth motivated in this way. And so this idea of maybe having a tool box with assessments that IRB has approved that we can use in our college that are relevant across the different programs. So we were curious to see, what type of response, if we would go that direction next year as a council, is there interest in doing so? You're here because you're interested in assessment evaluation. And so we've met, we've talked about it, and it was a good meeting, and I think we're to the point now that, do we narrow this down because it still seems kind of broad. And I think the people involved are thinking about, okay, well, let me try one of these tools this summer and see what we can learn. So that essentially we're piloting what might be a good common assessment, or you may say, no, that didn't work for us. Let's keep looking. So your thoughts about this idea of maybe having a few common assessment tools that you don't have to use, you could just voluntarily choose to use them, And that could then be part of maybe the college showing not only reach, but also this idea of impact in a more uniform way or consistent way. Excellent. Well, hopefully you found something useful from this workshop. If you would like to share in what ways it was, we do have an evaluation form that you're welcome to leave on the way out.
The impact of the workshop.
Yeah, we're evaluating the evaluation workshop. Yeah, one of those twist on words. If you're interested in knowing how to do a poster in a more educational way, we'll have that on March 9th, I believe. Another lunch and learn. So we'll see you then or next time we cross paths. Thank you.